Welcome back everyone. Today we're going deep into the woods. The woods, by day, they can be beautiful places, full of animals and plants and life. By night, they can scare people out of their minds. There's something about the trees that attracts and scares people at the very same time. Perhaps you'll be even more scared by the time this video is over. My name is Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary deep forest stories. Starting off with number 10 now, we have The Smiler. This story comes from Reddit user Blasphemous Mushrooms, and it's about his friend Tom. Tom was a new police officer who had been given late night shifts. He never came across anything too strange on his patrol, but this night was different. He was by a local park, checking there was nobody doing anything suspicious there late at night. As he walked around the outskirts of the woods, he saw a man standing with his back facing him on the edge of the darkness. Tom yelled out to the man, "Hey, you, what are you doing? Come over here right now." The man turned round and gave him a blood-curdling smile. Then he ran into the woods. Without even thinking, Tom chased after him. The smiling man was leaping over branches and ducking under fallen trees like a pro. It was almost inhuman. He was on another level. Eventually, he stopped in a clearing in the forest. He smiled and then kept running. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. Tom was exhausted and only just managed to even look up. The man had stopped. He turned around, smiled, and then began to walk slowly back into the woods again. Tom chased, but the man was gone. It was like he had just vanished into thin air. To this day, he swears this wasn't a normal criminal. He had an experience with a sinister paranormal being. Next up at number 9 now, we have the kidnapping. This one comes from Dr. Jim Danger, who said that when he was 18, he and his friends took a trip to the Apalachicola forest in Florida. They drove deep into the woods so they wouldn't be disturbed by any park rangers. On the very first night, they decided to do some exploring. Almost immediately on their walk, they started seeing signs that someone had been there before them. Big bags of trash were strewn everywhere. They came across a campsite with a van. There were clothes strung up on a line, coolers around the area, and a big golden retriever. They tried to back out, but then an old man stepped out and greeted them. He was friendly and chatted to them for 10 minutes about where they were from before they went on their way. Something didn't seem quite right with him. 2 months after the trip, a friend called him and told him to turn on the news. It showed an old guy with a van and a golden retriever. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he had just been convicted of at least 4 murders. He had kidnapped and murdered a girl in Georgia, an older couple in North Carolina, and a girl in the very same park they had been in not long after they left. They called the police and ended up actually helping them with the investigation that sent the murderer to prison. At number 8 now, we have the Mountain Man. This one comes from Reddit user CMurder4000. He's a geologist who said that he did his graduate fieldwork in Nevada. He was way out in the middle of nowhere when he saw a hand-built shack in the distance. A mountain man stepped out and looked at him. He panicked and went away. A while later, he was in a nearby area when he walked up to what looked like some kind of farm. When he got closer, he could smell the strong scent of marijuana. It was an outdoor weed farm. As he turned to get out of there, he was confronted by a man with a gun. The man offered him $10,000 to not report what he had seen and let him go. He agreed, but he never collected the $10,000 or even reported it, saying he was too scared to do either. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Screaming Woods. This forest lies just outside of Pluckley, said to be the most haunted village in Britain. The woods get their name because of the blood-curdling screams locals hear from the forest late at night. They say it's haunted by a highwayman who was captured by the villagers hundreds of years ago. They dragged the criminal into the woods, pinned him to a tree, and killed him with a sword. He screamed as he fell to his death. Visitors come from all over to experience the paranormal goings on there. I found a story from a recent visitor that went like this. I was in Pluckley and a group of friends and I decided to go to Deering Woods. When we got there was birds singing and the atmosphere seemed quite happy. We got out the car and my friend noticed that the birds had stopped singing as we went into the woods. You could have heard a pin drop as we walked in up to halfway towards the crossroads, and us girls decided to come out, so we went into the car and the boys went back in. About 20 minutes later, the boys came running out. They got in the car, started it, and turned it head on to the woods where my friend's brand new car had stalled. We saw this black mist coming towards us as if it was walking down the path. There was definitely something there. We then went down to the Black Horse pub where we discussed the day's ghost hunt, and the boys said it was only when they started getting close to the crossroads that it appeared, so they ran out. We have talked to a few of the local people who have said that early in the morning you can hear screaming coming from the woods. Next up at number 6 now, we have The Thing. This one comes from Surly Vet. He said his friend friend was deer hunting once in the mountains of Virginia back in the 1990s. One winter morning, he set out with his gun to a tree stand. It was still very dark when he arrived, and so he climbed up and waited until dawn. While he was waiting, he decided to reverse the batteries in his flashlight. He had an issue with the switch and thought this might fix it. Suddenly though, he was disturbed by a chill running down his spine. Out of nowhere, he began to feel a crippling fear and a feeling of being watched. He was thinking about climbing down from the tree stand and walking back to his truck when he heard a blood-curdling scream at the base of his tree, along with scratches and rustling in the bushes. He fumbled for his flashlight and cursed himself for messing around with the batteries then. He said the thing that was down there was able to elicit a fear in him like nothing he'd ever experienced. Before that, he'd always felt very calm with a gun and confident that he could handle any animal out there. This time though, he was filled with horror and dread. The thing screamed, shrieked and scratched for 15 minutes and then total silence. Not once did he see anything. When he came down a few hours later, he packed up and left the area. He has never been hunting again. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the rope. This one was first told by Rodat on Reddit. He wrote a brilliant first-hand account which I'll read for you now. Me and my friends thought it would be a great idea to share a few drinks on the side of a dark and unfrequented mountain road at 2 in the morning when everyone should be asleep and no one would bother our drunken boisterousness. Where I grew up, it's very common to go around on motorcycles, not the speedy racing types, but the more commercial 150cc variety. It's also very common to ride these motorcycles without helmets, and the weather usually calls for just a light windbreaker, even on very dark nights on lonely roads such as the one we were on. After distancing ourselves sufficiently from civilization as it was, we parked by the side of the road under a tree. I should mention there was a dim glow emanated by the moon, and our eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness enough to see each other. Another thing worth mentioning is that this road led to an army encampment several kilometers away. So the only sort of people that would potentially drive by us were tough army folk. It was now 10 minutes past, and we were having a good time when we see headlights creeping up towards us. We ignore them because we were all well sheltered from the pavement, sitting under a large tree whose branches grew wide and provided a good deal of cover. The headlights belonged to a Jeep that zoomed past us and suddenly came to a halt. They see us. This was terrifying because here we are, drunk as college students usually are, on bikes without helmets at 3 a.m. on a winding mountain road, but our fear was slightly alleviated as the car drove away. Still, why stop at all? They joked and said that the guy probably saw there was 4 of us and 1 of them. Ha ha ha, loser. Some more time passes. A second pair of headlights belonging to another car drives past us, stops and then leaves. At this point we were getting more and more sober and more worried, so we decide to call it a night and head home. We get on our bikes and start riding back when one of us realizes he's left his backpack under the tree. So we turn around to cover those 3 to 4 kilometers to where we were. As we approach the tree, the backpack owner dismounts while we turn the bikes around. One of our headlights sweeps an intensely bright beam across the branches of the tree. As it points to the branches just above where we were sitting, in a flash we witness, illuminated in stark contrast to the background darkness, a human body hanging by a rope. It had been there the whole time. Now we know why the cars were stopping, and we drove on. Next up at number 4 now, we have Sally in the Wood. Just outside of Bath in the UK, you will find some woods that many locals dare not go near. It's a patch of woodland known simply as Sally in the Wood. Supposedly it's haunted by the ghost of a murdered girl. They say that birds in the woods there cannot sing. Drivers have reported hearing a child scream from the darkness, and some swear they see the ghost of a young girl running out into the road. Legend says that Sally, the murdered girl, haunts the woods at night. She causes cars to crash on the unlit stretch of road where she comes out from behind the trees. They say she was a gypsy girl, supposedly imprisoned in the 18th century. She was locked up in a tower without food and water, left to die inside the woods. Others say she was a local witch who lived to be 100 years old and now continues to torment others in death. Locals say that she may be dead, but her chilling stories live on. Coming in at number 3 now, we have the cougar. This one comes from Reddit user Smokey the Marshmallow. He said the scariest experience he had as a park ranger in Washington State was being stalked by a cougar for a day and a half. One day she was hiking up an old trail when she had the creepy feeling of being watched. That night she camped at a shelter made of 3 walls and a roof. One side was completely open. At one point, she even put her emergency foil tarp around her sleeping bag so that she could hear anything stepping around her. The next day, she found fresh cougar feces and scratches on trees on the trail that she had just hiked on. About a mile past the shelter, she found a half-eaten deer in a brush off the trail. That's when she knew that a cougar was nearby and that it was stalking her. The last 2 hours of hiking through the dense forest were the most hair-raising of any hike she had been on. Next up at number 2 now, we have The Visitor. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this story in another video, but it's too good to leave off the list. It comes from Senior Puffy Pants. I still remember that name. He said he was once leading a group of school kids up Mount Sterling in North Carolina. They were camping at the top of the mountain on a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other guide went to bed in their tents. He chose to sleep in a hammock outside. He lay there reading his book until 10:30 p.m. when he decided to go to sleep. The moon was so bright that it lit up the trail they had just climbed up on. As he was drifting off to sleep, he saw something move on the trail. As he looked closer, he noticed it was a person. They were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail towards them with no headlamp on or any gear. He froze as the person moved closer towards the camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain and then stopped in their tracks. It was a man. He sat there in a way that looked like he wasn't trying to sleep. He was just watching them. The guide was terrified. He stared back at the man. They stared at each other. This went on for hours and hours. Then, at 3:30 in the morning, the man stood up. He took a moment to survey the camp, a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail they had all come up on. To this day, he has no idea who the man was, what he wanted, and why exactly he was staring at them. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Goblin. This one comes from Reddit user Justin F. 100,000. He said this one happened about 8 years ago. He was working as a camp counselor for Camp Tommy in New York State. He was staying in some cabins at the top of the mountain, each one separated by about half a mile. One night, at about 1 a.m., he was sneaking off to meet his girlfriend in another cabin. He decided to cut through the forest to speed up the journey. Suddenly, he heard a rustling in the woods, and he stopped to investigate it. There are big animals that live in those woods, so he was expecting to see something like that. A bear, perhaps. All of a sudden, though, this 3-foot-tall humanoid thing jumped out of the bushes and just looked at him. It was too dark to make out any real features, but it definitely had 2 feet, 2 arms, and basically looked just like a person, but tiny. He was curious and walked towards it. He spooked the thing and it bolted back out into the woods. It ran stiffly but was very, very quick. To this day, he has no idea what the creature was, although everyone seems to have their own theories. Alright campers, what did you think of that? I know there are a million scary wood stories out there. I've seen enough to make 10 parts, but I'd also love to hear your stories. When was the last time you went to the woods? What's the scariest time you've ever had in the woods? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. As always guys, my name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next video.